Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, now part of the Work-Defined Podcast Network. Join us as we explore the vital role of compensation, strategy, data, and people analytics in navigating today's complex business world. With the resources of Work-Defined, we're bringing you deeper insights and actionable ideas from top HR experts. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky. Hello and welcome to an HR Data Labs podcast that I will absolutely enjoy and love. I have with me my friend, your friend, the brilliant Paul Reiman of Novo Insights.
Ooh,
Paul, how
brilliant.
are you?
You just set high expectations for me already, David.
Well, you will bring it, because for the people who don't know, Paul and I have had a great relationship online, especially in the World at Work forums, where we've had very interesting conversations, let's put it that way. And if it was a hockey game, you might see the referees get a little nervous. Yeah. But it isn't. It isn't that way. We actually have I have a very high esteem for Paul. He's a brilliant guy. And when you listen to him speak, he actually has all the backup to bring it. So there are people who fake it. Paul has it. So there you go.
I'll take that. It's sort of like the two third-line enforcers that it's sort of their job to spar a little bit, right? You're going to get some pushing and shoving, but it's their job. It's what they do. That's how they operate.
For you, it's like Mario Lemieux dropping the gloves, right? It's like you don't expect it, but when it happens, you're like, "Holy crap! Did Mario Lemieux just drop his gloves?" And then, by the way, that's a very old reference for people who don't know who Mario Lemieux is. But
yeah, you got a modern, now in Chicago, it's a Connor Bedard thing, right? Like
Connor Bedard. Well,
we're all in
he's
there
hurt right now, but yeah,
that's right.
For those of you who don't know hockey, we just throw out names that you probably have no idea about. Wayne Gretzky. Let's just throw that out. Everybody knows Wayne Gretzky. So
now you're really aging it, though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm old, so there you go. So, Paul, what's the latest and greatest from Novo Insights? What's going on with you guys?
Oh man, we're only 3 years old, so if you think of it from that perspective, we're throwing toddler tantrums and growing like a weed. No, I think we're still a thriving organization. We're happy doing the work we're doing. One thing I think that people who follow us will start to see is a clarity of how we talk about what we do, which is normal in a services firm after a few years. You're like, what are we really good at as a team, right? And one thing I'm proud of is I think for the first 2 years, people thought it was, Paul in his garage with, but no, like it's a real team. And I think that's what's led us to do some just renovation of like, what are we collectively good at? Not what does Paul do, but what are we good at? Right. And we're really excited about the thinking we've done and the way that we're going to bring some of that to market next year. So go to novoinsights.com. Also, you can find Paul all over LinkedIn as well as the World at Work forums. And they're pretty brilliant. I follow him very intently and not argue. Stalking. Like
it's not, well, the police haven't been called yet. So.
That's right, not yet.
When they do,
you'll know it.
I didn't do it. So, Paul, as we do on every HR Data Labs podcast, what's one fun thing that no one knows about Paul?
Gosh, so I've done enough of these. I feel like the one fun thing is getting harder, right? That no one knows is getting difficult.
Did you see
I'm a big Lego fan. Let's go with that. I don't think I've pulled that one out before.
That's cool.
People know the music thing. People may not know the Lego thing. And I am super proud of passing that passion to my children.
That's awesome. To me, Legos isn't just the piece in the foot. Legos is a thing. I used to watch Lego Masters all the time.
Totally.
And if you're a parent, you know what a piece in the foot means. But Legos is one of those things where you get to actually spend time with your kids. And if you ever saw the Lego movie, spoiler alert, it's all about how the boy wants to spend time with his father.
Totally. And I love the recreating, right? So that's the one thing I'm working on my boys now. It's like, no, you don't just put it together and play with it. Like, if it falls apart, it's okay.
Yeah.
The fun is the reassembly and let's take that Star Wars set and that Minecraft set and merge them in some way. And like, that's what I love about it. It's the creativity that comes with these simple bricks that you can make into anything you want.
And it has become so much larger than just the bricks themselves. There's a huge following. There's a huge, beyond the Lego show, the Lego Masters and the Lego movies and things like that, it's a real thing. And I applaud the Lego organization for allowing it to become that. I have Legoland literally 10 minutes from my house in New York.
Yeah, it's Disney and Lego are the two brands that I'm like, they've become so like ubiquitous within family homes, and sometimes you don't even realize like how wonderful of a job they do. Yeah. Maybe too wonderful in some cases because it costs a lot, but it's just part of our fabric as a family. We have a whole room basically dedicated to our Lego stuff because it's such a big part of it. And
if it brings the few of you together as a family, that's totally the beauty of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the frustration, too, when you step on it.
My wife has a very good organizing structure for the pieces. So that doesn't happen to us often. And our two troublesome dogs probably find them before our feet do. So that's the other consequence.
You found them on the other end.
That's right. It's like, that's not where that's supposed to be.
I'm looking at my two dogs. They have they don't really do plastic like that. So thank goodness.
Yeah, dachshunds will do anything.
Oh my gosh!
Find, so
yeah, pugs eat, but the pugs will only eat things that smell good.
So there's your fact that I didn't know about you, that you're a pug. I used to be a pug owner. When our pugs passed, we changed, but next round of dogs will be pugs again. Those go. Those were phenomenal.
I love my pups. They're sleeping right there.
That's all they do.
Basically. Well, they are just like their dad. So
they're old.
Yeah. So
totally.
Today we have a very special episode for you because we're recording on December 19th. We're going to be talking about the predictions. Well, first of all, we're going to do a retrospective for 2025, and we had a fun time talking about this before. But what 25 shocked us about? What did we kind of anticipate? And then what's going to happen in 2026? And so that'll be the fun coming up after this.
Yeah, sounds like a blast.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your Hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, "Can we see more candidates?" Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
So, Paul, let's get back into it. And I think for those of us who are in the HR world, I think we kind of were a little shocked coming into 2025 and what happened after the administration being sworn in. I think we were a little bit taken by storm a little on the rapidity and the swiftness of the changes. But before I lead the witness here, what was your take? What did you expect to happen in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, certainly from a U.S. sort of political regulatory environment, we knew there would be evolution. That's actually part of how our system works. Right. So some change was expected. What changed, we didn't necessarily know exactly, and we certainly didn't know in what form and how fast.
Right.
So that, I don't try to make sort of political projections or what the law will do, because I've always been wrong, and even with you're right, it changes again, so it doesn't really matter. So I did not enter 2025 with specific expectations on that, but I didn't think it was going to be as swift, and certainly some of them I'm like, I didn't see that coming at all, right? They weren't on my radar screen,
right.
In many ways. So I think it was a surprise. I think the nature of that was a surprise, and the nature of it will continue to be a surprise. I don't think we're done with, additional change on the regulation front in the U.S. And in 3 years, it could change again. I mean, that's just the world we're in right now, is a more volatile regulatory space is what we should all expect around regime change in particular.
Well, I think the other thing, because you mentioned just the U.S., even in Europe, where pay transparency had been a thing and the EU directives around pay transparency had become almost I wouldn't say they've become an afterthought, especially for U.S. companies. They're portending to a deeper global shift towards being more transparent. But with everything that happened in the U.S., it kind of overshadowed this gigantic shift in Europe.
Yeah. Well, and particularly in the U.S., I think I'm going to project a little bit. Like, I think pay transparency and pay equity was seen as a social good to an extent. And that's less in the ethos now because of sort of broader political change. I'm not saying people don't still want to pay fairly. Don't get me wrong. It's more the public emphasis isn't on this is the right thing to do. It's more on this is what we have to do. And I don't love that personally, but
right.
I think that's the truth. Whereas in Europe, that tone is still a little bit different. I do think this is a social good, and we're being sort of regulated and nudged to sort of create accountability for the social good that we should be creating. So there's definitely a difference in the climate in different jurisdictions around the world.
And to that end, I think even within the U.S., the states, in some cases, the municipalities that care or that are more, hate the blue state, red state thing, even though you have a picture right behind your head of blue and red.
Happens to be blue and red, yeah.
But it's almost creating the dichotomy of the blue being more transparent to the extent at which it's pushing the red to become transparent anyways.
Well, I think employee expectations are there for sure,
exactly.
Right? So, I have many clients in Texas. I don't expect Texas to implement sort of statewide pay transparency anytime soon. However, they compete in talent markets.
Absolutely.
That candidates are more likely to apply to jobs when they know what they're applying to. That requires a degree of transparency. Employees, most organizations, if you have a nationwide workforce, you're not going to say, well, in California, we'll show you your range, but in Texas, sorry, not required.
But actually, when pay transparency first started, that did happen.
We all did, honestly. Colorado, great. Nobody from Colorado applied to this job. How many disclaimers did we see that said that?
And still, to some extent, that actually still happens.
Yeah.
In California, the pay range is this. In Colorado, the pay range is that. In New Jersey, here's what we have to disclose. But everywhere else,
Yeah, that's fair, right? Like, there's still a little bit of working around the, how much do we have to share? Partly because I think people don't always know what the answer is.
Absolutely.
But I do, I think that has changed the expectation of the talent market. Like, by and large, I'm going to see what this job should pay, for sure.
But beyond pay equity, because I think we can all agree that because of what happened in the shift away from DE&I, that pay transparency has become not just because of the laws, but because of the ubiquity of the information. I used to get told all the time, hey, my constituents, my employees can go up on a certain website and see how much they should get paid in a certain jurisdiction.
For sure.
The data's there.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I do think pay equity and pay transparency are two sides of a coin. I don't know what the coin should be called, but they're not the same thing for sure. And workers, regardless of how they personally feel about pay equity, whether they are on an advantaged or disadvantaged side of that, workers still want to know, how does it work? How do I make more? Why did I get a 3% instead of a 4% raise? That's transparency too, right? The explainability of your pay and how it changes. Workers just want that, regardless of pay equity. So that's what I mean. It's the opposite side of the coin. They're related, but they're not identical. And it's really there's no doubt that people still are expecting to know more and understand more about how pay works. That's why they go to work in most circumstances. So they want to know how it works.
The genie is out of the bottle with that. You cannot put, if that's a phrase. I'm sorry if I offend anybody by saying that, but you cannot tell people that they can't know. You can't. I mean, it's like, wait a minute. I can go to LinkedIn. I can go to any source, Glassdoor, or any source on the web, and find out how much this job gets paid. You have to tell me. So why be obfuscating it? Because this gives people the right amount of information, whether it's a very large range and you can explain it or not.
Yeah.
You kind of need to do this now.
That's right. It's an expectation. And that's a trend that's been sort of bubbling since some pioneers in Colorado and the U.S., for example, kind of pushed it down that direction. But there's no doubt that it's part of what any large organization for sure is managing, and even the smaller ones have to respond because it's just become part of the market.
And it is evolving too. Like New York is implementing a pay reporting system that they're going to actually have some teeth in, where with California they asked for pay reporting ostensibly like the DOL reporting, the EEO-1. But even beyond that, New York is now asking for pay ranges or actual pay, and they're going to be doing analyses, and it will have teeth. So when we start talking about what's the lowest common denominator for supporting pay transparency, oh my goodness, the bar just got much lower now. Yeah. And, companies need to pay attention.
For sure.
What surprised you about 2025? What was the big shock for 2025?
The big shock in 2025. Yeah. I mean, I try to keep pretty even keeled. So I don't know if shock's the right word. I think one might be, I was actually right about something, and this is very kind of tech specific.
Right.
CompTech is a crowded market. There are a lot of players, and I was a little bit shocked that we saw coming a trend of consolidation. Right. So a number of logos came off our landscape board, being particularly, I think the primary drive there was the bigger HCM, HRIS payroll players deciding that their native tools aren't good enough to actually power modern comp strategies and finding better tech to do that. So I was a little surprised that it actually happened. Like we felt like it needed to.
Right.
But then that really played out with 3 or 4 specific acquisitions. And we're like, oh, look at that. Yeah. Like this is actually a trend. So I'm always surprised when I'm right about something. My wife would tell you it doesn't happen very often. So it's nice to see when it's true.
The clock is right twice a day, unless it's a digital clock, in which case it's always wrong.
Totally. I think the other thing I think that shocks me, just I'll put it out there, that, and this is, I don't think this is unique to 2025, but I do think I've learned in 2025 how size of company and maturity of company are not correlated with the maturity of their compensation strategy.
Oh my goodness,
right?
Yes.
And it shouldn't be that shocking. I'm the idiot, I think, to sort of stumble upon that. But it's noticing large organizations that whether they just never had the priority for it, whether they built through acquisition and as a result they've got 11 different comp strategies. But, I think for the longest time, I sort of assumed there's this natural growth and maturity curve that everybody follows. Right. And it became crystal clear to me, you can have a beautiful modern comp strategy with 200 people, and you can have the world's trashiest comp strategy at 200,000 people.
Yes,
it's possible. And I don't know if the comp sort of tech ecosystem or consulting ecosystem gets that sometimes, honestly, where there's sort of this assumption that large has different needs than small. But it's not about size. It's really about kind of what do you have in place and how do you operate.
Well, I've certainly dealt with that with companies that had very strong ownership cultures, where the owners wanted to control everything, and they grew through, like you said, acquisition and the ownership strategy of this is a family-run company and we're going to run it like a family, and the matriarch or the patriarch will decide how that compensation works.
Yep.
I've had situations like that and then say, hey, we now want to hire a consultant to come in and fix it. Oh, crap. Yeah. Are they still around? Because that culture that culture is hard to change unless you start seeing some of the cracks forming in the foundations.
Yeah.
And then that's when they turn to a Novo Insights or an HR Data Labs consulting to try and help them with that.
Yep.
And by the way, before I forget, I wanted to plug, you mentioned before that Novo Insights does a MarketScape on the compensation market, the compensation technology market. I do not want to overlook that. Brilliantly done stuff. You guys are the gold standard when it comes to the compensation market, technology market. If you guys haven't seen it, ping Paul. We're actually going to put in the show notes. We'll put a link to where you can go and request that information.
Yeah, we update it quarterly, and there'll be a new update coming here in the new year, in early January.
I didn't want to skip over that, Paul, because
thank you.
I have referenced it in the past. I've also sent people to you for that reference in the past because it's just such good stuff. So.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of that. From this, we had one comp tech provider we actually built our roadmap a little bit around this. Like the way that you've described it is helpful. And there's one super large software company that when it showed up in their presentation to their leadership, that was a moment of pride for me. I'll admit, we're like, we've become an authority on this, which is we're proud of that.
And then if you see it in board meetings and they go, well, this is what Paul said.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I like to call those my Mike Curran moments because of the brilliant Mike Curran from McLaughlin Partners, the old McLaughlin Partners, who he used to come and present to my boards and my senior leader teams when I was in the financial services world. And I love Mike. He's a frequent guest on our podcast. So anyways, going back. So why don't we switch gears a little bit? Because we've been talking about 2025.
Yep. And
if I can use the word mashugana, the craziness of 2025. Let's segue into 2026 a little bit and talk about first of all, what are your predictions for 2026? But also, where do you see us going? And then I'll ask you what your crazy swag is for 2026.
Crazy swag. You're asking me to
but not start there. We don't want to start with the swag. We want people to still listen to the end so they can get that.
I love it. Well, so one thing that everybody knows is coming in 26 is the implementation date for UA transparency. I don't want to sort of go back to that theme, but we should a little bit. I think my prediction on that, though, is that I think organizations are now waking up to the reality that it's not one thing. Like there's multiple articles of that requirement, and people are going to realize quickly that Article 7 is the one they didn't think enough about. And for those that aren't aware, Article 7 is about the right to information. So back to our conversation about pay transparency and not being the same as pay equity, doing the math to spot 5% gaps is critical, important, and you'll have to do that. Certain statutory reporting requirements around you have to show your gender pay differences by level, right? That's true. But the fact that workers can ask for certain information whenever they want it, that's the thing I think a lot of global companies are now just going, wow, that's going to be a lot of work if we don't think about how we do this well.
Don't you think also the job evaluation piece is going to kind of be a little critical there? Because that's one where it's not solved for very easily. It's kind of a difficult one, no?
Totally. I mean, all of EUPTD and some U.S. stuff, hangs on sort of equal pay for equal work, like work. And the words are different in different sort of regulation, but who are you like?
Right.
And job evaluation is ultimately the bedrock upon which that is built, right? So if I don't know what you do, I can't say who you're like. Right. And in many circumstances, you're going to be too small in a given country to sort of use a job and say, yep, everybody who's a customer success manager, we can compare, because you only got 3. So you're going to have to make good choices about who is similar and in what way. And absolutely, that's built upon, the job architecture or job evaluation methodology for sure. So it's the cracks in that foundation are going to be visible as you try to approach a more transparent pay strategy.
So if you were, I'm not going to ask if you were a betting man, but if you were going to give advice to companies that are watching this, and maybe not even watching it, but have to pay attention to this, what would you tell them to do first? Would it be getting job documentation together, or is it too late for that even now?
I don't think it's never too late, right? The best time to start is now if you haven't started already. But I do think, yes, you cannot ignore the solid foundation of how do jobs compare to one another and how do you build sort of pay structure and policy to maintain, appropriateness. Like there's never a bad day to make sure that that's right. I think comp people in particular can over-focus. I mean, that's really important, but you can't forget about the process of executing transparency. So the advice I give is talk to your tech providers. What do they have? Talk to your IT teams, your broader sort of Ask HR sort of employee help teams. Like, how are you going to manage the inflow of requests when somebody says, I want to know more about my pay, right? So it's a process problem
to do this. Seriously.
That's right. It's not just a strategy problem. It's not just a build the right job structures and it's all going to work out. Like there's a process issue to address here, and tech can help for sure. And that's the advice we give. Like, don't forget about the process execution side of pay transparency, and particularly those right to information requests that have very specific requirements that you can't foot fault on.
Do you think that the HRITs have some, because you mentioned the tech companies, do you think the HRITs have some, I don't want to say culpability here, but do you think that they're going to develop anything? Like, because we've seen, because I know that there are some providers in the EU that really have this nailed.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. It's very difficult because there are so many pieces of the pay directive, the EU Pay Transparency Directive. Because as you mentioned, there's job documentation, there's leveling, there's pay equity, there's requests, there's a bunch of things. Do you think that the HRITs and the ERPs are going to get their act together to help this? Kind of like what had to happen with the Affordable Care Act in the U.S., when that got implemented.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like we described with past consolidation, I think the big HR systems are realizing that their native sort of compensation or employee experience capabilities weren't always that great, and we've seen them build those out, right? Like Workday has deeply, just to pick on one, there's deeply focused on sort of how do you get employees to interact with the system more thoughtfully. There are sort of case management capabilities and the richness of communication that you can provide with total reward statements. Like all those things have matured so that they can be more credible in the space. I just don't see them, any of them, innovating at the speed that's probably necessary to have readiness in 6 months.
Unless they get acquisitive.
Sure. Or partner, right? I mean, you don't have to do it through acquisition, but you can find you can find a player that will integrate data nicely, and you can decide like what's the system of record for has a request been made? What's the system of record for the pay information we want to share? Integration is easy now in the grand scheme of things, right? If I think back to when I started my career, integration was really hard.
Really, yeah.
Now it's not. So you don't have to buy it. You could probably partner it, but I do think something is needed because employees know to go to their HR system for something. They don't necessarily know to go somewhere else. And how do you manage that?
Right. And having too much of the somewhere else causes friction. And friction's not your friend when it comes to government regulation and might cause even worse problems.
For sure. I do also, I give the advice, like, this is going to sound like I'm devious, and I'm really not. But, like, if you make it too easy, you can actually encourage sort of bad behavior too, right? So if all I have to do is Slack, give me my pay transparency report, I might do it every day, right? Like, don't make it too simple because that's not the spirit of the rule either, right? Like, it's not to create cost for the organization to comply. So there needs to be intentionality behind the request and the response. But friction is not the same thing as like making it too easy, right? Like there's a nice balance there.
Yeah, exactly. So coming back to the U.S., let's talk about what else do you see because that's a big one. And for many global multinationals, multinationals, that's going to be a problem that they have to figure out right now. But what are the things that you think the U.S. companies need to start focusing on for 2026?
Yeah. I still think some of the basics matter, right? So as I mentioned before, I was surprised last year, but really learned how you might have been around for 80 years, but your company might have a very immature comp strategy.
Right.
And, while right now the ethos is not going to be sort of more transparency is required, but people expect it, you got to get your act together. Like no better time than today to start building that basic foundation. So if you don't have a clarified view of how much you want to pay and why, a job structure that clarifies how work compares to one another, a comp approach that makes it clear what's fair to you and how you want to manage that. Like, you need that. You can't ad hoc this anymore, really, at any scale.
But doesn't that come back to going all the way back to the beginning and looking at your philosophy and looking at the way your processes are set up? I mean, to me, if you haven't done that in decades anyways, good time to start now.
Totally. We call it the foundation for a reason, right? Like it should work for a while. This is not something you have to tweak every year.
Right.
But right, I lived in a 100-year-old house before I moved into this one, and you better believe you got to look at that foundation periodically because you're going to find something there. And homes are built for 100 years. Comp strategies are not, right? Like it's a 5 to 10 year life cycle to these things, and you absolutely need to kick those tires if you haven't.
And then we get back to job documentation, which takes on a different approach in pay transparency, especially given some of the U.S. state regulations that require very, very clear documentation of jobs.
The job description is always sort of the artifact that everyone overlooks. I know you have a passion for it too, but like,
I do.
I created it when they were hired. Let's talk about that, right? Like, I do think AI is going to make it easier to author them. I
30
said it.
minutes in, we finally hit it. I have to drink. Hold on.
AI is going to make it easier to create, right? There's no doubt about that. The question is, how do you make sure they're current and sort of updated? And what's the discipline that needs to be created that as David inevitably learns, grows, and evolves his responsibilities, because that always happens. How do we make sure that we still have an accurate depiction of what that actually means, and how do we value that work, fairly?
And I think a lot of people who haven't done this in a while, I like to give them the example. If you haven't updated your job description since probably pre-pandemic,
they're probably wrong.
Work to do.
Yeah, they're wrong. And I do think, and it feels big, right? Like, people freak out about, gosh, that's a lot of work. It is less work than it used to be. It really is. Like, there's systems out there that focus on it. There are absolutely, it's a use case for AI to standardize and sort of manage the language. Like, it doesn't have to be as hard as it was 20 years ago to rewrite job descriptions.
Absolutely. And not only that, it's a distributed function. It's not like HR is going to have to do this all themselves. You have to get your managers involved. They get their employees or supervisors involved. And, if you have 100 jobs, it may be 100 job descriptions, or you might actually find that you're consolidating because work has changed so much that either you're consolidating or you need to create a different strategy because now in some cases like Colorado, you need to also provide career transparency as well and career landscapes, career architecture, so that people can see where do they go from here.
Yeah. Speaking of that, on that exact topic, I think, comp geeks like us have been talking about job architecture for a few years now. That's become a phrase that people understand. When you're selling that to the C-suite or to your organization, you always talk about how it's the framework that can enable employee development and mobility. 9 times out of 10, that doesn't get implemented. Right? A lot of times the comp person is starting the conversation around job architecture, and they stop with, okay, now we have the bones. We can compare work fairly. We can build comp structure around it. But we don't really get to and now what does this mean for the employee, right? So I do think another 2026 sort of watch out for people is take that step, right? Like your criteria around what makes a level, a P3 versus a P4, isn't good enough for an employee to know what to do with it.
Right.
Land that plane that say, if you're an accountant, this is what it means to be a P3. This is what it means to be a P4. And is there a way for you to learn those skills, take that training, whatever it is, to sort of learn and grow? Like, that's the next step that often gets deprioritized. But it really needs to be prioritized. And again, it's another example where it's not as hard as it used to feel. Like, there's ways to make that easier and more systemic.
And it's not really an HR function as much as it is a manager enablement function where you got to give your managers the ability to have that conversation with employees, show managers how they can do it themselves for employees, and that employee-manager relationship gets richer.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you liken it still to the sort of architecture metaphor that we use for job architecture, right? Like, we're starting to give, like, choices around the colors of the walls or, right? Like, we're giving additional tools within that. Yeah, it lands at a manager conversation, I'm not a big fan, and I'm not sure I don't think this is what you were suggesting. I'm just saying, hey, managers have the conversation. We need to empower them to do it consistently and give them some language. But yeah, you're right. It's not oh my gosh, I'm a comp team of 3. I need to figure this out for the whole company. No, you need to figure out how to enable it and give some examples, give some tools, but you don't necessarily, you're not accountable to know how everybody learns and grows.
And I think you said it before that the technologies that are available in the market can get a lot of the way there because the technologies are enablement technologies. So
that's right.
If you're a comp team of 3, use technology, use the web, maybe use AI to help build those tools to give your managers the right things they need in order to.
That's right. And in many organizations, be really smart about, because I work a lot with the comp person, right? Be really smart about how you use and partner with the partners, right? It is their job to sort of land HR strategy for a business function, for a job family, however you're organized.
Absolutely.
And they want this for their workforce. So it's like partner with them to figure out how to enable those managers. Don't feel like you have to innovate alone. Like use that resource.
Bring them in early too. Sorry. Bring them in early and make sure that they're part of the onboarding process for your organization, because they'll see things in that relationship with managers and leaders that you may not have seen.
Yeah.
And can help you parse the way forward.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
So Paul, we're getting there. What's the silly, wild guess? What's the swag for 2026? What's the big thing that you think might happen that we're going to come back to in December of 2026 and go, Paul, what were you thinking when you said that?
You mean
wow, you
other
nailed
than
that.
Maybe a Chicago sports team will win a playoff game? Like, can I start with that? Like, as a proud Chicagoan, we are in the desert of success. It feels like right now.
You've won the World Series. You've won a lot of NBA championships. You've won a Super Bowl at some point, and you've won the Stanley Cup in my lifetime.
That's true. So, like, there is some success. However, keep in mind, like, I talked to people who were not alive when we won an NBA championship. Like it's been a long time. It's almost 30 years since that happened.
But you can still say the words Air Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Or Michael Jordan. Sure. And people know exactly he was the best basketball player of all time. Sorry, LeBron. Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't mean I'm not going to get a Christmas card.
That's right. But yeah, so that's one bold, silly thing. I am waiting. The sign, the green shoots of hope are there for all of us. But let's see what actually happens. Notwithstanding that bold
I'm talking
prediction.
about for comp. Come on, man.
So I have sort of, maybe this isn't that bold, but I've long felt that the surveys has been, people love their survey data. My big, bold prediction is one of those survey companies is going to realize that they need to buy or invest in an automated submission process, right? So a big survey company is going to buy a real-time provider, or they're going to actually create that capability to get – so those categories converge, right? So we've talked about them separately. I think they're not separate anymore. They need to be the same thing. Right. So my bold bet is that one of the big players actually figures that out and either makes a deal or has been secretly working on an approach to make that better.
That's a good one. We'll definitely write that one down and put it on our calendar for next year, and we'll have a conversation with you next December.
Yeah,
and
I could be wrong. I might not get the time scale right, but I think that the circumstances are ripe to make that happen in the next 12 months.
Yeah, I'll give you one. Not that you didn't ask, but I'll give you one too.
I want one. Yeah.
And I will tell you that pay transparency, there will be, quote unquote, red states that have to get on board with pay transparency because they will get a lot of pressure from their chambers of commerce that it's not a bad thing and can provide some benefits. So my bold prediction is at least one red state will pass some kind of trade transparency law. I'm happy to be wrong on this, I'm happy to be right on this, actually.
Yeah.
I won't be shocked if I'm wrong, but that's a silly, wild bet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see that though, because I do think, red states in little quotes. Like there's a lot of purple spots within red states, and there are some red states,
like Austin, Texas.
Yeah, and there's some red states, quote unquote, that have demonstrated centrality, sort of within that framework, and that's where it's likely to come from, right? Like I lived in Ohio for 5 years. I'm like, wow, they kind of bounce back and forth sometimes, and that's what you. And
there are cities in Ohio that actually have transparency.
Exactly. So you could see how that would become okay, now it's like, do you let the sea cities compete with one another?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's my wife. I used to cover Ohio when I was consulting. She always say, "You're in an Ohio city that starts with a C." I'm like, "Yes, I am," because
which one?
Almost always yes.
Here, and here. So it kind of covers the entire.
Exactly. Just don't get Northwest Ohio, which is where I actually lived for 5 years. So it's like I didn't live in the C section. Oh, that's
well. I have very good friends in a healthcare organization that former clients that were in the upper Northwest, and shout out to them. They know who they are.
Yeah.
So, Paul, it has been a pleasure having you on the HR Data Labs podcast. Like always, it's been a fun conversation. Of course, we're going to come back to this one and
see how
talk
wrong
about
I
it,
was.
and especially look at the transcript and go, that didn't age well, or that aged really well. Hey, look at that. So thank you so much for being on. You're awesome. We really appreciate you being here, and hopefully we'll have you again on soon.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, David.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you all for listening. Take care and stay safe. Thank you for listening to the HR Data Labs podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share it with your network. Also, check out the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch every Friday on LinkedIn. You can also check out the recordings on Spotify. Thank you, take care, and stay safe.